Shakespeare scene, and let's chat with some of them here tonight. I mentioned we have Debra Ann Byrd of the Harlem Shakespeare Festival. She's going to be our first guest, and Instagram Live is a little bit of a fickle creature, so let me see if I can share some images with you. Here we are. Okay, let's see if this works. So Debra Ann Byrd, she'll be our first guest. She'll be coming up right around the corner. And let's see if see that image. Okay, great. That worked right there. If any of you can see that image, just give me a thumbs up. Debra Ann Byrd will be our first guest, and she is from the Harlem Shakespeare Festival. She is from a company called Wing and Soar Productions, and she is also currently touring the country in her own production of Becoming Othello, which we'll be chatting with her about in a moment. Let me see if I can go into our list of participants and ask her to come on and join us. Let's see if you're here. Becoming Othello. Here you are. So we'll ask everyone else out there, if you're hearing me okay, if you're doing all right tonight, give me a big thumbs up. Hello, Debra.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Can you hear me all right?
I hear you just fine. Yes.
Wonderful.
Can
Now,
you hear me all right?
I hear you loud and clear.
Okay.
Now, Debra, where are we speaking tonight? Where are you coming from tonight? Are you in New
Tonight
York or out
I'm
of New York?
actually in Paradise Valley, Arizona. I'm going to adjust
Okay.
this a little bit because I'm having trouble seeing you right. So if you can bear with
Sure.
me.
Certainly.
There you go.
All right. You see me all right?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so Debra, before we get into everything we're going to chat about tonight, I think you and I actually met about maybe about 15 years ago or so. I was at that time doing some kind of festival. I think it was either the Midtown International Theater Festival or one of those Midtown festivals. And I think it was one of the first years that Wing and Soar Productions was doing the festival circuit. And I think, if I remember correctly, I remember chatting with you very briefly at that time. What year did Wing and Soar start production?
Take Wing and Soar Productions started production in 2003.
2003. So I think it was
Yes.
just after, it was maybe a couple of years after that. And how did you get involved? Are you one of the co-founders of that company, correct?
I am the founder of Take
You
Wing and Soar Productions.
you are the founder. Okay.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
tell us
Um,
about that. Tell us about your journey into starting that company and how you got there in the Shakespeare scene.
Absolutely. I started Take Wing and Soar Productions to create center stage opportunities for classically trained actors of color. Um, that came out of my experience at college. While I was at college, I went to college specifically to learn Shakespeare, and because I wanted to learn Shakespeare, I took the whole 4-year courses instead of just going to an outside class. And then my exit interview, I was told that by an agent that as someone who had a proficiency for language, perhaps I should try my hand at August Wilson. I was told that someone, like me, a little brown girl, will have a challenge in Shakespeare. And so I just said, well, if that's so, then we need to shift this. This needs to shift. And so, along with an attorney and 5 women from my community, I
Mm-hmm.
decided that I would form Take Wing and Soar Productions so that classically trained actors of color would get to perform any role that they'd like to perform and have a safe space to do it in.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. And that was the first theater company that you formed out of school. That was you started off right off the bat with your own company.
Yeah, I
That
did
that's
because it
that's
was it was necessary.
that's really that takes a lot of guts, Deborah, to make your own company. Because when I came out of school, it took me a couple of years to really kind of find my footing and to kind of understand what was what in the scene and who was doing what, and I didn't really have the guts to go and start my own company. So for you to kind of take the rein by the horns, or if that's the right expression, take the bull by the horns, and start your own company and create opportunities for yourself and for your peers, that's a really bold and brave thing to do. And how was that process? Did it go easily? Was your company greeted with open arms, or did you face a lot of resistance?
I think that we were greeted with open arms by the people who we were created to serve. We were greeted with open arms by the community. But in some respects, we were not greeted with open arms. Folks wanted to know, well, why are you doing Shakespeare, or, stuff like that. Sometimes, most of the time, most of the community was with us, and the audiences were there, and they enjoyed it. And for a lot of our people, these were new stories. We didn't just do Shakespeare. We did other classics. We did Oscar Wilde. We did plays by and about people who lived prior to 1900. We did contemporary writers like Laurie Hayes. We were folks who were very interested in making sure that these artists had a chance to practice that which they had learned for years, getting a Bachelor of Fine Arts and a Master of Fine Arts. So yes, it was a challenge, but I was determined to make sure that these artists graduating from BFA programs and MFA programs had somewhere where they could go and practice their craft. When we go to school, we learn so much. We learn so much about voice technique, how to speak, how to walk, how to handle, how to move in these particular kinds of plays. Right. And then when we come out, the opportunities were little to none, and I sought out to shift that.
So I have a very similar experience. I just want to see where you came from. You talked about how in your schooling you felt a gravity towards to Shakespeare and to classics, and you had more proficiency. You took more effort to study. What about Shakespeare drew you to it? What about it was magnetic for you that made you feel that connection to it?
Well, what was very interesting is I was an actor in Harlem for about 7 or 8 years, having started at church. And I was going on and doing theater. I did musical theater, I did gospel theater, I did Black theater. And then a troupe of actors were performing at the Victoria 5 Theater in Harlem. The theater is a few doors down from the Apollo. And when they were performing, I saw a troupe of actors do it, and I said, "What is that? I want to know what that is. That looks very interesting. That looks very exciting." And so I just said, "Okay, I'm going to learn it one day." And then time went on, and then I said, "Okay." Life got really rough. My daughter was struggling with life issues, and I was struggling, and I wanted to die. All of that was really going on for me. And then in my fight with God, I said, okay, God, what am I going to do? And then I realized that I really love theater and that I wanted to try that Shakespeare thing. And that's what took me to school. And I realized later that what drew me to the Shakespeare is my upbringing in the church. I'm a King James Bible girl. So when I hear something like, when I hear the Bible, he that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in him will I trust. Surely he shall deliver me from the snare of the fowler and the noisome pestilence. And then I hear Queen Elizabeth and her speeches. They were the same for me. They were familiar for me. They made me feel the same kind of feeling, and that's what drew me to the Shakespeare.
Well, I think that's a great connection, Deborah, because if you look back at some of the historicity of what texts Shakespeare had to draw from, the Bible was very much a part of where he got his texts, where he got his ideas, where he got a lot of his phrasing. So it's absolutely that connection is there. And I come to Shakespeare myself with kind of a similar experience, similar but different. I am of Middle Eastern descent. And growing up, I grew up in a very mixed area in Queens, racially mixed area. And when I went to school, I didn't see in literature, I didn't see on TV, I didn't see in culture people that really looked like me or the people that I grew up with.
Yes.
So then one day in, I don't know, maybe 7th or 8th grade or something like that, I told this story before on this program. I came across, in English class, I came across Othello. And on the cover of that edition of Othello, and I wish I had that image to share with you here, there was, I think it was Laurence Olivier, but he was made up to look like a Middle Eastern man. And, depending on what your interpretation is of Othello the Moor, some people depict a Moor as a black person, and some people depict a Moor as a swarthy Middle Eastern person.
Yes.
So in that particular image, it looked very much like my people that I grew up with. And I was really taken aback. I said, wait a minute, Shakespeare is for stuffy British people. Why is there this character on there? And once I dove in, I got hooked. And then all of a sudden I said, well, maybe I can do this. And years later, when I was finishing college, and I had gotten a little bit more of an education, and I knew a little bit of Shakespeare's background, and I had some training in the technique, something that was really interesting for me was that was right around the time that at the Public Theater, Patrick Stewart did his famous production that was a reverse race production. Right. With Patrick Stewart as Othello, as a white Othello, and all the other company members being black. And that, for me, that opened my eyes, that said, wait a minute, not only can I, a person that's not conventionally white, or, that would typically be cast in such a thing, why can't we flip the script, and why does it just have to be this? That was the kind of the beginning, if you remember, like the mid 90s was the beginning.
I do remember.
When cross-cultural casting was kind of grudgingly becoming accepted, and people were pushing the boundaries of, okay, well, we don't have to only be, if the character is written as white, it doesn't necessarily have to be cast as white. We can cast it as black or as Hispanic or as Asian or as whatever the case may be. And I think that was one of the productions that really brought that home for me. So the first couple of years of Take Wing and Soar Productions, you guys, you got started. You got some of your neighborhood, some of your peers, some of your people behind you. At what point after the creation of Take Wing and Soar did you guys start the Harlem Shakespeare Festival?
10 years in.
10 years in.
And 10 years in,
okay.
We started the Harlem Shakespeare Festival. And we started Harlem Shakespeare Festival because it became more and more difficult to do the shows. Our staff, very small. And so time, I mean, we were each doing like 5 jobs, and it became extremely difficult to do a programming year round. So we decided that if we want to stay alive, what we would need to do is to create the Harlem Shakespeare Festival. So we take a year-long program and we squeeze it into 3 months' time between August and December, and do our full season at that short time and call it a festival. And then Shakespeare, because what was happening in our world is that most of the productions that got the most that people enjoyed the most or got the most attention seemed to be that. And we also knew that we can put all our other programming, even though it was not Shakespeare, into the festival.
Right.
And we also, we lived in Harlem, so we called it the Harlem Shakespeare Festival. And we have the same, of course, because it's a program of Take Wing and Soar Productions in partnership with New Heritage Theater Group and Vosa Rivers. We just kept the same mission, and then just launched the festival like that. Yes.
And you had already, for over the 10 years of Take Wing and Soar, you had built a pretty good fan base, a pretty good following for your company. So then they were, I think, more acclimated to the idea that, well, hey, this company's done some Shakespeare and they're pretty darn good. So we're going to come check out this Harlem Shakespeare Festival. And what in the process of putting that Shakespeare Festival together, what were some of the things that you explored perhaps for the first time, or what paths did you take that you might not have explored before if you hadn't created the festival?
Well, what we ended up doing an outdoor, because it was be one indoor, one outdoor stage reading, Shakespeare on film. And so that first year we did Antony and Cleopatra outdoors in the outdoor amphitheater. And then we went indoors and did Coriolanus, and we did Shakespeare on film, Shakespeare in prison. And then we borrowed a Shakespeare film from the RSC, lend it to us. That was like what our programming was at that time. And then we just kept adding as much as we could to the roster, and folks just was liking it, and it was still going. But, you know, of late, I have been taking a small hiatus because I became extremely exhausted, you know, in one respect. And I said, you know what? Debra Ann Byrd is a producer, yes. But Debra Ann Byrd is an actor.
Right.
And so my mentor, she said to me, that's Dr. Barbara Ann was my mentor when I started the program. And she's the one who really helped me to be able to put the shows up anyway, because my company was in residence at the National Black Theater for 7, 8 years. And so
wow,
while she was alive, she said to me, Debra Ann, if you are not a martyr, I need you to get your behind on that stage when you get a chance. And so I finally said, you know what? You're right. When she passed on, I felt duty bound that I had to get on the stage. And so most people, of course, knew me as an actor. I mean, as a producer, and didn't know me as an actor by that time.
Right.
But I pulled up the bootstraps, did what I had to do, and I played Cleopatra. And then the community saw something different. And then I was seen as something a little bit different. And, you know, now since I've played Othello as a male, and the experience that happened with that, I was prompted or felt that I needed to write this story, Becoming Othello, a Black Girl's Journey. And so that's what I've been doing for the past 2.5, 3 years. Working on Becoming Othello under the umbrella of Harlem Shakespeare Festival.
Let me throw the image of that up if I can. Here's an image of you. Oh, I think it might be too big to put there. Let me see if I find another image.
There go my sword.
I don't. You know what? I was speaking earlier about the fact that Instagram Live is a little bit of a funny
I might
animal.
have a book. Yeah. I'm right here at the computer with my goodies. Oh, that's not him. No, he's not in there. Hold on. I don't have it right here in front of me, so I can't share it. So, but if you go to Becoming Othello on Instagram, you'll see him.
So
you'll absolutely see him.
That's that's one of the first things that grabbed me when I've been following your feed with Becoming Othello for a couple of years now, and I've always been drawn by the imagery. I think it's just a fantastic set of stills you put up on there. So tell us about the process of putting together Becoming Othello, and how did that? I think before that, what led to Becoming Othello was you did a reverse gender production of Othello with Harlem Shakespeare Festival, correct?
Yeah. Well, what we did with Harlem Shakespeare Festival was an all-female production of Othello.
Okay.
And we did a stage reading of it in 2013 in Harlem at the, my brain is going, woo, poo, poo, at the Aaron Davis Hall place.
Okay.
And so there were 18 women, and we all, the roles that were male, they were male. We changed, we put on drag, that's how I'm going to say it, because it's easier that way. We changed our face, we changed our being, and we were the males. And of course, Desdemona and Emilia and Bianca were female.
They stayed female.
Say again?
And they stayed female.
And they stayed female, absolutely. But the women, it was a multiracial cast of 18 women, and we just put that show together. During that time, I decided that what I would do is I would shift. I would remove the earrings, remove the makeup, change my hair. I usually wear my hair really long and curly or whatever. And I decided that in that time I was going to wear short hair and no makeup, and because I needed to feel closer to Othello. I needed to begin to access the male quality of my voice.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to shift. And so as I began to shift, I began to drop my voice low and low and speak like that every day. So that by the time I hit the stage, you wouldn't see Debra Ann Byrd. You would
Right.
see Othello. And the world around me began to shift and change. And I was clocking all the things that were happening between my relationships of people I knew and people I didn't know. And sometimes it was interesting and fun and funny, but other times it was painful. And all these gender things started coming in my head about what is gender anyway, and why do we treat each other like this, and what's happening what's happening to me. And so I said, I got to write about this. And then I went on with my world. In 2015, we said, well, let's do the main stage of it. And then that was even more of that. And I said, okay, I absolutely have to write this.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to figure out, well, what am I going to write? Is it a memoir? Is it a solo show? Well, maybe it's a memoir and a solo show. But if it's a book, then who's going to help me? And I said, well, my friend, Paul Edmondson from the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust.
Mm-hmm.
He's someone who writes books. I'm going to ask him to help me write a book. And then I took the idea to him, and he took it to the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, and they said, Debra Ann, we want to host you for a year in Stratford-upon-Avon, and you come here, and you live in the residence across the street from the Birthplace Trust, and you do research at the Shakespeare Center, and together we'll do interviews on tape, on audio, so that you'll have something to walk away with to begin to write this book and to begin to write this solo show. And so we did that. And then I applied for Folger, and I had a Folger fellowship to do the same thing. I wanted the American version of what I got in Britain. And
Mm-hmm.
then I applied to this. I just kept going to see how much support we could get. So I applied to the what's that called? Columbia University Scholars Program.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a 3-year fellowship that helps people in the community to flesh out an idea, whether it's a book, whether it's a film, whether it's a program for the community, whatever it is. And they made me a fellow. They made me a scholar for 3 years.
You did all that in the course of about a year, if I understand correctly.
In the course of about a year, yes.
That's unbelievable.
I was accepted to all those programs in the course of about a year. And
Mm-hmm.
then I'm still currently a part of the Columbia Scholar Program through 2022. But my first thing that was able to come out is the solo show.
Wow.
And I did the solo show. I did the solo show in Stratford.
And that ran in Stratford for a while. Then it came to New York, I assume?
It hasn't come to New York yet.
It hasn't come to New York.
It hasn't come to New
You're holding out
York
on
yet.
us, Debra.
Well, you see, what had happened was I was doing my best to try the show out, to see if it had any kind of legs. And so I did it in Stratford, UK, then I did it in Coventry, UK. And then when I came back to America, I did it at the conference, the Shakespeare Theater Association conference. And then I was on my way to where I am now, Paradise Valley. And I was on my way to Flagstaff, Arizona, and
Mm-hmm.
Santa Barbara, California, to
Mm-hmm.
Massachusetts, and then back to New York. And I was supposed to perform in the United Solo Theater Festival in the fall. And then in the spring, do a main stage in Harlem.
And when
But
were you supposed to
COVID
breathe
happened.
doing all that, Debra?
Huh?
Did you schedule time to breathe in between all that?
Yes. But COVID happened while I was
Right.
in Paradise Valley, where I am now.
Right.
And New York started to get really scary,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and wifey got the COVID, and I couldn't be in the same space. And here.
Okay.
And I'll be back that way as soon as I can be back that way.
Okay.
But writing the Becoming Othello project has been very challenging, very interesting, very rewarding. The
I'm sure.
audiences have I mean, I've started a new IG, not a new page, but I'm starting a new feed. I'm launching a new feed. And in the new feed, you will get to see my journey through stories, through videos, through found pictures, through my own photos, through pictures of each thing. And you'll be able to see. But then when we're able to be live again, I'll come live. At the same time, I'm working on what if we don't become live? What is a digital way that I can get this story out there?
Right.
Because it is a story for our time.
Absolutely, especially with everything that's going on right now, with the Black Lives Matter movement, and everything that's gone on in the news with unfortunately the killing of several people, several black men around the U.S. George Floyd and
Breonna Taylor.
That's right. Yeah, and
on and on and on and on.
And on and on. I didn't know where to start because I could give you a list of about 10 that came to mind. Eric Garner, I knew the whole thing. So how has that informed your process of how you relate to this character who is a character who is such a noble man, but then he because of society's influence on his actions, he becomes lost and assailed upon. How has what's been happening in the news influenced the way you've been addressing your work?
Yeah, I've been wonderful, and I've been completely bust up. I've been, as you can even see now, I've been scatterbrained, and I've been whole and complete. It comes in waves. And in my thinking about Othello, I think about the pressures that have been put on him to be this general, to be someone who saves the day,
right.
To be the entertainment sometimes, but at the same time, to be talked about, to be ridiculed, for me, Othello's a man who said, oh God, okay, I met this beautiful woman. I don't have a family. I don't have mom. I don't have any children. This is my chance to settle down. This is my chance to have a family. And then I'm told that that's not going to happen for me. I'm getting old. I'm feeling like the betrayal that Othello starts to feel is not just a woman who has broke his heart and messed up his dreams, but then thinking about the white folks that he's encountered all over the place and those challenging relationships. What begins to happen for me is Desdemona is not just a woman. She's another white person who broke my heart, and I lose my goddamn mind.
Absolutely right.
And in the losing of my mind, unfortunately, I can't really get a hold of myself. And so I make the wrong choices. I choose to kill instead of talk, figure out how to love, figure out, is it true? I can't think that straight because my mind and my heart is broken. But on the other side, there's Debra Ann Byrd, whose heart has been broken, whose life has been a big mess sometimes, whose tragedies have been huge. But I choose to love you. And that's the difference between a Debra Ann and an Othello. Because I don't choose death. I choose life through all of that damn pain. And we can make it through all of that damn pain if we choose life and love.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's so moving. I think that's so profound. And it comes from such a real deep place in you, Deborah. And I thank you for sharing that with us. That's amazing. So Deborah, I unfortunately we have to let you go. We have to get to our next guest, but it's
Thank
been
you.
so amazing chatting with you. And I really encourage anyone who's in this chat right now, anyone who's going to be watching this later when I repost it on Facebook and YouTube and wherever else, on Instagram, IG, whatever they call it, IGTV, that you guys must check out Deborah's feeds. Becoming Othello on Twitter and on Facebook, Harlem Shakespeare Festival, Take Wing and Soar, all of those, you can check those out. Deborah, you are, I think you are one of our finest members of the Shakespeare scene, and I'm so happy to have a chance to chat with you. And I look forward, after all this is said and done, to having a chance to sit down and chat with you face to face over a cup of coffee when you get back to New York and things are back to
Absolutely.
some new kind of
Absolutely. I
normal.
would love that. Thank you so much, Rodney, for having me. I really appreciate you.
It's a pleasure. All the
Absolutely.
all the best, Deborah. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Well, that was fantastic. Anyone who just joined us, we just spoke with Debra Ann Byrd of the show Becoming Othello of the Harlem Shakespeare Festival of Take Wing and Soar Productions. And now we're going to switch over